Jim Trotter is with us now. And Jim, nobody will ever really know how this happened to a man that we all thought was one of the happiest folks that we ever met.
Absolutely, Boomer. Now, with Junior, we know he took his life in May of 2012, and it was later discovered that he was suffering from CTE, a degenerative brain condition that's caused by repeated blows to the head. Now, with Junior, depression is one of the symptoms of CTE. And for decades, depression was only discussed in the shadows because if a player acknowledged it publicly, it was viewed as a sign of weakness. But today, the league, the union, the players' families are all trying to bring this topic into the light because they know keeping it in the dark can have life-threatening consequences. On the surface, Junior Seau didn't just live life, he loved it. His infectious smile was as disarming as his physical presence was imposing. He called everyone buddy.
Hey buddy, come on in here.
And that is exactly what he made you feel like when he engaged you. But after he retired, that sunny disposition turned dark.
Junior Seau drove off an embankment this morning. The former 12-time Pro Bowl linebacker was hospitalized with minor injuries. His lawyer told me
Seau laughed off the incident in the hospital, telling family and friends that he had fallen asleep behind the wheel. But a bleaker picture developed while recuperating at the home of his ex-wife, Gina Seau.
We talked a lot those several days, and I was saying, you know, this is a chance that you have another chance. I was met with a really blank stare. And I know he was exhausted and tired from the accident, but looking back, that was part of his depression and his symptoms of what he was dealing with. He was just sort of not there in many, many ways.
He was always a guy who could connect.
He was the most charismatic, opportunistic, driven human being, and for him to just sort of shy away and back off from life was so uncharacteristic of him.
Uncharacteristic, perhaps, but not unusual among retired players and even active ones. These men contend that depression can be as debilitating as a serious injury, and post-retirement life can be as crushing as a Super Bowl loss.
And what am I going to do tomorrow morning when I wake up? First, who am I? I'm no longer an athlete. There's a part of you that dies. And part of death for the person that survives is grieving. If you don't go through that grieving stage, then you're dealing with some issues.
If it's not too personal, how low did you get?
I didn't get low to the point where I was contemplating taking my life. But I can see how some players, or some people can get to that point.
I just remember laying on these railroad tracks and thinking about ending my life because I didn't know what to do, know where to turn.
Boo Williams played tight end for the Saints from 2001 to 2004. Like so many others, he knew his career would end one day, but he never seriously contemplated life without the game.
When I stopped getting phone calls, and that's when it hits you that your career is over. Going from job to job to job, trying to find what you like to do, what is your niche. I mean, it went to the lowest of the low. And it was something that was kind of embarrassing to me because it really was weighing on me.
In 2010, 5 years after leaving the NFL, he found himself retracing the route he drove to the Saints facility each day for work. Only this time, instead of going left to the Saints complex, he made a right toward the train tracks. For 2 days, he slept beneath them before finally laying down on them.
What was going through my mind was, taking myself out, ending my life. And, I lay down the railroad tracks and I I said my prayers and told, God to take care of my family and, just take me and hope my family's okay. I felt like I was a big disappointment to people. It was just tough feeling like you're 3 foot nothing when you're 6'5".
What is it that leads a man to go right when he should have gone left? To see dark where others see light?
We had several NFL players over the years that have come here that are active players that came suffering with anxiety and depression.
Larry Burns is the director of the Crosby Center, a mental health facility outside San Diego that evaluates and treats individuals suffering from cognitive issues.
Guys have come in here that have had ideations of suicide. They have 2 children, a beautiful wife, and the wife walks in the bedroom and he's got a gun in his mouth and he's 28 years old. It's countless. It's not 1, it's not 2, it's many.
The NFL and the Players Union hope to assist these active and retired players through a player engagement program. Dwight Hollier, who played linebacker for 9 seasons with the Dolphins and Colts, oversees one of the programs and shares his experiences with players he meets.
I isolated myself. I didn't reach out. There's a stigma with men, with macho men, athletes, about help-seeking behavior. But I think having conversations and opening up the dialogue has lowered that resistance.
You're deemed as a gladiator. You have to hold your emotions in check. You can't show those signs of weakness on the field, because guess what? Somebody's going to take advantage of that. So you suppress a lot of that. But once you leave the game, we have to go through that process of decompressing and conforming back to a regular way of life.
The challenge is getting the individual to accept that true strength means asking for help. That challenge is tough for most players, including Seau.
He really took pride in who he was, of being that go-to guy, and it was important to him. And I believe that as time went on and that role was slipping from him, it became more and more difficult for him to even discuss. His exact words I remember were, "I'm so dark that even picking up my surfboard doesn't make me happy. That won't even put a smile on my face."
2 months before his death, Seau spoke about the dangers of the game and why it's important to enhance player safety. It's not known if he sought clinical help, but with depression's grip wrapped around him, he sounded far different than that happy guy who called everyone buddy.
Those who are saying that the game has changed for the worse, they don't have a father that can remember his name because of the game. Everybody had to wake up with their dad, not knowing his name, not knowing his kid's name, being able to function, at a normal rate. I mean, they will understand that, the game needs to change.
Yeah, I had that conversation with Junior 2 months before his death. I had called him to ask him about the perception that Commissioner Roger Goodell was making the game softer with his enhanced player safety rules. And Junior said it needed to happen. And one thing I realized later is that you can hear the resignation in his voice and that sort of longing and depression there, where he was speaking about himself, I believe, in that case. So right now what the family is hoping is get the word out so that players know help is available. And CC, as you know, there are a lot of players out there who are struggling with this.
Thank you, Jim.